I'm Courtney, and I write the blog Outlander Behind the Scenes, and I also do cast and crew interviews and this discussion. Today we are talking about episode 411, which is called If Not for Hope. And I am a book and show fan. I'm not a book purist. I enjoy changes in the book. I probably have the hardest time when they change Jamie and Claire's character, and I don't feel like they're the people that I know.
Hello, my name is Catherine. I am a family physician and also a contributor to Blacklanders. And I am a book reader, not a purist. In fact, I forget a lot of the details of the books when I'm watching the show. And that's me.
I'm Karmen, and I write the Outlander Anatomy blog, and I also am a book reader and a TV show watcher. I love both. I am not a book purist, but I do like comparing the book to the TV show. I think that's fruitful, and I think it's interesting to explore that. I agree with Courtney. I think the biggest problem occurs when there are changes to the characters, and when you have different people saying lines that in the book belong to other people, there are consequences to that sometimes mess with the show a bit, I think.
Okay, my name is Antoinette. I'm a criminal defense attorney. Discovered Outlander in season 2, was captivated by it, went back and binged the whole of season 1, re-binged season 2, and then went on to discover the books. I love the show more than the books, actually, because I discovered the show first. And I'm not a book purist by any means, because I love to see the creative adaptations that they have made. Some work and some don't. And but for the most part, I champion the show because it still is excellent TV. I'm just having a little half dry January, so I haven't drunk anything since the new year. So I'm drinking tea out of my most awesome mug.
Well, that's why you're surly.
Yeah. It's not right.
I am drinking water out of a wine glass.
I am drinking very cold Prosecco, which is very dry and very nice. And I don't have a stem because I tend to tip those glasses over.
I have a stemless wine glass as well. But I like making, it's kind of like my version of sangria. It's a white wine punch, basically.
Beautiful.
And so with orange juice and grenadine and a splash of bitters and a splash of lime.
This is like torture for Antoinette.
It's not fair.
Oh, she's so
well, we'll have a wet February then.
Yeah,
girl. No. We're gonna have a wet end of January. What are you talking about?
All right.
Let's dive in, guys. Okay. So, impressions of 411, if not for hope.
I liked it because I liked that they had so many different characters on. And all of my favorites, except Dr. Abernathy, but we won't go there. But I mean, it was just overall was just very well done. Stayed close to what I expected, but there was enough new things that caught me off guard and also kept me interested because I had no idea what was going to happen next. And that's always fun.
I liked this episode. It wasn't my absolute favorite, but it was very close. Good writing, good acting, the music.
I really liked this episode too, which I know that's not how everyone feels. I've seen a lot of conflicting opinions on Twitter, but I felt it was a lot from the book with some creative, seamless changes, most of which worked. I loved the big cast of characters. We got to see the birth of some relationships. I felt like the characters were mostly in character, which that for me is the biggest thing. So yeah, I really enjoyed it.
Well,
A sober Antoinette.
Yes, I had quite a few issues with the episode, to be honest.
Mhm.
My overall impression was that it was good TV. And I appreciated it for what it was, and I thought some of the acting was really stellar, and I thought the costuming, especially at the river run scenes, I thought the costuming was exquisite. And I liked quite a few of the performances. Um, so generally, it was good TV for what it was, and I enjoyed that.
All right, let's jump into favorite scenes. Catherine, you're up.
My favorite scene was when Phaedra came in and was telling Bree that she needed a new dress. And then when Bree, and she was so animated and excited and just being her typical self. And even as I was watching that scene, my initial point, my thought was, they're depicting her too casual for a slave interacting with Bree. That was my first thought until Bree asked her to sit so she could draw her. And then her whole demeanor changed. Suddenly she got very uncomfortable. It became very clear that there was a power dynamic. Um, and but at the same time, when she said, she was like, why would you want to draw me? And she said, because you're beautiful. And she was pleased, but you could tell she was still scared. That was just so well done. It was heartbreaking, but it was also just so well acted. It was definitely my favorite.
My favorite scene was the conversation between Bree and Lord John on the lawn. I thought that was extremely well done. I thought he was just fabulous as Lord John, just spot on. And the range of emotions that he projected from, kind of the smug is not quite the word, but the comfortable complacency of being a lord and being of the highest class in this group of people, being at the top of the heap, to suddenly expressing, do you realize that you could ruin my life, by revealing the details about me being gay, and everything in between, his threat to her that she's playing with fire, and that's right out of the book, the whole thing. And then Bree's, actually her coming realization that he actually would also have sex with women, that he wasn't just confined to having male partners. And I think that really shocked her to the core. And I thought she displayed that quite well. I thought she did her best acting in this episode opposite Lord John. I also very much, I have to echo what Catherine said. I almost wept when that scene between Phaedra and, in fact, I can almost weep thinking of it now, and Bree, the small joy that came upon her face that Phaedra, allowed herself to be complimented in that way. And yet I know, I agree, she was fearful about it because there was a danger in it. But it must have been just wonderful for her to have had that moment, to have somebody reaffirm that she was appreciated for who she was. And I thought that was really a lovely scene. And this, just a couple of other really quick ones. I like the way the opening scene played out with Roger standing under the shower. I thought that was clever. I knew within a second what they had done, but I still thought it was clever. And then the last one, I love the night scene between Marcelie and Murtaugh when she goes in there and slams the cups on the countertop to wake him up, and then tells him that if she wanted her husband shot, she would do it, and that, but first, whoever got their dirty boots on her blanket would be the first to get shot. And him saying, are you already tired of your marriage? I thought there were just some really very clever words between those two. Very sprightly, very clever.
My favorite scene is actually between Jamie and Claire at the tent. And that's keeping aside how the whole thing was handled. I just liked the scene, just the scene for itself. I thought it was beautiful. And it was so, it was so quiet. It got my attention. It was just tender. Yeah, I thought it was really beautiful. And particularly Sam. And then tied for second for me is actually both scenes between Marcelly and Murtaugh. Both when she says, because he doesn't put his boots on my blanket. Because Murtaugh's usually the salty, he's the one, and she just she's like Jenny Jr.
Yeah.
And I just think Lauren Lyle kills it as Marcelly. I just think she's so great. And then also the scene where Murtaugh's reminded what she wants, and she's standing in the other room, and everything that goes on in her face, like he's going to ask him, and then the relief when Fergus says, "My place is here," and then just her thank you to him. Just the whole thing was very moving for me. So that was my second. The entry hall scene when the play between Lieutenant Wolf and Forbes. I'll talk about that more later, but that and the dinner scene, I loved it. I was so entertained. Antoinette, is your favorite scene Lord John Grey?
Hell to the no. Oh, hell to the no.
In the scullery?
He wasn't in the scullery. He's in a freaking hallway. The hell? I'm looking at that scene and I'm saying, what are these people doing? This is the 18th century. There is no way that Lord John Grey would be taking his pleasure in his host's hallway. No. I don't have any favorite scenes, to be honest. No, I don't. I mean, as I said, it was good TV. I liked it for what it was, but I like Marcelly's scene. And Lauren is a brilliant actress. I like her. I like the interaction with her and Murtaugh, because I've not been really enamored with the Murtaugh character this whole entire season. And I started to like Murtaugh again in these interactions with the Marcelly character. I also like the scene with Jamie and Claire at the end when they were, coming to some sort of reconciliation, because up until that point, I just wanted to bitch slap Claire because she's going around with this aggrieved expression on her face. Like Jamie is the dirt under her feet. And I'm saying, are we supposed to believe that you traveled back through time, gave up your career, gave up modern life, gave up hamburgers and the daughter and your daughter to come back to this man who you're looking at him as if, So I enjoyed that scene because it rehabilitated Claire in my estimation. The tenderness, the quietness of it, as Courtney said. Because I think a lot of the times, I don't know if the writers think that we all want drama and carrying on and over the top emotions and all this gratuitous, not even gratuitous, all this explicit sex scenes. I, for one, don't watch Outlander for that. I want the intimacy. Well, I want the intimacy and I want the connection. I don't necessarily need to see all of the simulated sex. I mean, not that I will turn it off.
Now we get to the bottom line.
I mean, I'm not going to turn it off. No, I will not object to see beautiful bodies simulating the act of love. No, but but that's not why I watch Outlander.
Okay.
I know.
No, it's terrible. It's fine. No, you're not terrible. You're Antoinette, and we love you just the way you are. And there's a woman who says every week, "I'm Antoinette. I'm Antoinette." It's Julie, right? Is it Julie? So let's go on and talk about standout performances, and you can add in favorite set, favorite costume, favorite music, if you'd like.
Phaedra, just every single time she came on.
She's
From
lovely.
the scene when she brought in the dress, from the scene when she came and she was telling Bree that, Foster was going to ask her for her hand in marriage. And I just thought that was phenomenal. Forbes. Okay. The little rat looking dude. Okay.
From what? He's in The Hobbit or Lord
Yeah, he's
yeah.
in The Hobbit versus the badger looking dude, which is the other guy, Wolf. But anyway. I just really like the way that Natalie Simpson played that part. She did such a fantastic job. The other favorite was the look on Ulysses' face when the judge's mother, I'm not even going to pretend to know their names.
Mrs. Alderdice.
Alderdice, okay. When she made her little comment and he had this look on his face that just spoke 1,000 words. It was just like, but it was not a look of inferiority. It was a look of, you're an idiot. I know you're an idiot. So let's just get on with it. I mean, I just loved it. The other was little subtle things that were in, like, for example, when Bree was talking to the judge and Lord John Grey exchanged looks right before. When Bree came in, after talking to Lord John Grey, and Ulysses kind of caressed her shoulder. He didn't really tap her. He just kind of rubbed his hand on her shoulder to let her know that there was someone coming in the room. I played it back many times.
Wait, whose shoulder? Jocasta?
Ulysses he kind of rubbed his hand down her shoulder. Ooh. Yeah, I caught that, and I
thought you meant Bree. I was like,
no, it was Ulysses on Jocasta's shoulder, and I rewound it a couple times to make sure that I saw it right. So it was like sort of a little hint. I loved Marcelly in everything. Her acting is just amazing. She's so natural, and she just makes everyone else around her look good, except for Fergus, who kind of comes off bland next to her, but that's the writing, not his fault. But what I really loved, and it's really interesting, I'm a musician, and I enjoy the music, but for some reason, that's not what jumps out at me. It's the sets and that wall color, the wall colors and the walls in all the sets, but the wall color in Marcelly and Fergus's bedroom, I'm still trying to figure out what that color is. And John Gary Steele has not answered my question when I asked him about it, because I really want to know what that is. It looks like a chartreuse something with a glaze over it, and I just want to know what that color is. Beautiful, because one day I have a door in my house that's going to end up that color. I don't know which door yet, but it's going to be. The costumes, all of them were just done. I mean, the costumes, you said once, they're so well done. You almost don't even mention it because there's never a misstep in anything. My favorite is Ian's. I love his costume. And it's just like this little mixture of all these little cultures that he's picked up along the way, but he wears them so naturally. And I just like that. He's just like a little kid, and who's just so happy in his new clothes. Lord John Grey looked fabulous. Oh my gosh. He just looks but then he'd look fabulous in a sack. But anyway.
or not.
Or nothing. Yeah, really.
Well, I have a question about your choices. Do you guys think that Ulysses could have gotten away with that look in the real time period?
Yes.
Okay.
Because no one would have been looking at him.
Yeah.
Exactly.
He would have
his
been.
Head,
he would have.
his,
He
his
wouldn't
head
even
was down slightly.
Yeah.
Too, so that.
And he was not there, as far as they were concerned.
Exactly.
So no one would have caught it.
No, they were just like pieces of furniture.
Yeah.
To the people.
Like the guy standing near the door.
Yeah.
Yes, I was going to say, did you all see the man standing back in the shadows?
Mm-hmm.
He was ignored, just like the little boy who was toting water.
But Bree always acknowledges them. That's one of the things I have to say about the character and the way it's written, is that she acknowledges every single person who comes in her presence, no matter who they are. And I don't know if it's something that was written, if it's something that Sophie does, because even in her speaking about the episodes, she's very, very socially conscious.
You know, since we're talking about that, I like the way that Brianna's character is written as a modern woman much more than Claire relative to the slaves. Because you can see it's like she can almost not even take it in, and she shakes her head, and then but she has an awareness of, this is where I am. You know, she's not doesn't go off on that. I don't know why they write Claire like that, so black and white and unbelievable. Yeah, but I mean, not to the extent they write her in this show. In my opinion, she's driven to do her healing, but she's not completely unconscious of Jamie and everyone else around her.
Yeah, I know what you mean. I know what you mean. Yeah, I agree with you on that, because in the books, yes, she celebrates the fact that she's a healer and it's an essential part of her, but she is not oblivious to what else is going on and the times that she's living in, because to a great extent she relies on Jamie to be her guide and her anchor and almost like her compass to help navigate the times that they're in. But show Claire doesn't rely on Jamie for much at all.
Yeah, right.
Well, so one thing.
Yeah, not even that for the most part.
Karmen,
yes,
what were standouts for you?
Well, I've sort of alluded to it before, but I think David Barry as Lord John did an absolutely fabulous part. He was erudite, he was sophisticated, he was privileged, he was poised, and he looked absolutely gorgeous in that blue suit. I don't think I've ever seen a suit that fit a man better than that particular suit fit him. He just looked fabulous in it. As I mentioned before, I thought that Bree did her best work opposite when she was opposite Lord John. I have to say that Lieutenant Wolf has some of the most fabulous facial expressions I've ever seen. One eye turning while the other one goes up. And I mean, his face, it was just priceless. He's a bit of a buffoon, but you know, he plays it to the hilt. And then, as already been mentioned, I thought that Ulysses and Phaedra, even though they don't have huge parts, they do really a lot with what they have just by their facial and body expression. And I think that's a testament to their acting skills to be able to do that. Ian is always terrific. I just think John Bell is just a doll. Marcelly, who Lauren she just smacks it out of the ballpark as far as I'm concerned. She just it's another one example of a small part, but she makes every single second of it just like an ice cream cone. It's just wonderful. I also want to say that I am a fan of Ian's costume also. I love his armband. I love now he's collected a new medallion for the Hidden Lake village Mohawk. That they're heading for, the Mohawk village. And then he has his knife and the little leggings with the fringe down the side. I just think he looks spectacular. I think the sets were really excellent. And I liked the tent, actually. I thought the tent setting, like you said, Courtney, was very soft. The lighting was nice. We could hear the stream gurgling in the background. It was just all very natural, quiet, peaceful, and a good place to say you're sorry.
I already said Sam in the tent. I thought he was great in that scene. Lauren Lyle as Marcelly, just every second, again, to echo you, Karmen, every second she's on the screen, she's just captivating. And so charming, and like she's so tiny and she's so full of fire. I loved Lee Boardman as Lieutenant Wolf. I loved him. I could watch his, his expressions, and he did it also well with his face of like, I mean, if it was a cartoon, Brianna would have turned into a steak. You know how they do like a big piece of meat when the thing sees, because he was just like, yeah, exactly. It was like you could see saliva dripping from his mouth when she walks down the stairs, and he's like, that's her. Oh my gosh. And then he and Billy Boyd just struggling over her, and then
Dominance.
there's a scene at dinner where she looks at him and he's like, and she just like looks away. I just thought he was so good. He just made me laugh out loud, in a good way. I thought Natalie Simpson, again, 2 small scenes, but she lit up the screen. And she is so good at that accent, that's Scottish. And I picked up that slave vernacular in the Scottish. And I also think she plays the role of having one, I actually thought of your family, Catherine, with being the children of the plantation owner. And now this is major spoiler territory that we're going to go into, which I'm fine with. So fast forward if you don't want to see this, viewers. But you guys all know this because we're all book readers, right?
Yeah.
That Phaedra is the daughter of Jocasta's husband.
Yes.
Dead husband. Remember that?
Yeah.
Dead husband. So she really is, and she plays that like she has a little more comfort, a little more. She feels like she's got a little more freedom, but yet she's still a slave.
Although
I just find that,
though, usually those children were treated very badly by the women of the house. Though.
Yes, they were jealous.
So she would have been treated very badly by Jocasta in real life.
Except
because
that
of the very
all
reasons.
of Jocasta's children are dead, all of them. So she would be the only thing. And we
another
see how
spoiler. Can I say one other spoiler?
Yeah.
Well, that's because she's getting it on with Ulysses. So.
Well, okay. So that was a question I have now that he rubbed her shoulder. But I thought maybe she cares for Phaedra because
that's her child, closest thing to her husband she's got.
Yeah, we saw how desperate she is when Jamie shows up, Brisha, but she's Mrs. Family. She's Scottish, and Phaedra is like her right hand person.
Yeah.
Do you guys think that Jocasta and Ulysses are in love?
I know, no. I don't think she's capable of loving him. I think that I don't even know if he's in love with her either.
Yeah,
I think he cares for her. I think
they care for one another, but I don't think
that's a
love
strange
is
dynamic because I don't think that that he would feel himself able to actually love somebody like Jocasta, because of the difference in their stations in life where they are. I think that would be a bridge too far for him, in terms of being emotionally in love with somebody like Jocasta. But he definitely cares for her. You can see it. It's much more than mistress and servant there. Yeah.
He's more of a butler than a slave.
Yes.
When I said about the man standing in the shadows, that he is serving the role of a servant, but we all know they're all slaves. But some are house slaves and some are field slaves. And the house slaves had a better life than the field slaves did. They're still owned, but it wasn't as harsh, I don't think, in many instances at least. But they know their roles. They're given certain roles. And I think the reason why Phaedra is a house servant is because of who she is, what her bloodline is. And I do think that that Jocasta is taking her out of the field. She could well have banished her to the field. She didn't. She brought her into the home, and she has maybe a little bit more stature there than
Mhm.
she would if she were doing crops and things. But
Mhm.
I think it is the reason is
Mhm.
because she is her husband's daughter.
That was kind of common amongst slavery. They kept the biracial slaves in the house, and there's a reason. It's a colorism thing, but the lighter skinned slaves were in the house and the darker skinned slaves were in the field. However, treating better, they ate better, definitely, because they got the scraps from the kitchen. However, they were also more exposed to sexual assault because they were in the house, the women, and the more so than the women who were in the field. So they were more brutalized because they had more contact, but at the same time they ate better, they dressed better, they often had better accommodations. But one of the things I thought was interesting in this house, they paid a price, and they were ostracized. They were also often not. It was a divide and conquer kind of situation where they kept people separate so that they couldn't form strong bonds against the slave owner. But the other thing I thought was very interesting is, and they did show this, and they did it very well, how the house slaves were very intimidated by Ulysses. They knew that they had to please him as much as they had to please Jocasta.
Well, certainly Jocasta would have propositioned Ulysses and not the other way around.
Oh, most definitely.
That's how it got
She holds
started.
the balance of power in that relationship.
Yeah, he had all the power.
So he couldn't have said no. I mean, who knows if he was in a relationship of his own, you know?
But the actor, Colin, and I will get his name right, Colin McFarlane. He plays that part very, very well. And one of the things I like about him is the fact that he's very much the British butler. I mean, even down to his accent, even. And that comes out. I don't know if they're going to give his backstory, but that makes sense given his backstory. But it's the fact that he sounds, English, and Phaedra sounds Scottish. And it just kind of plays into what their stories are.
I think he sounds American.
He sounds pretty British to me.
He's enunciates very, very carefully his words.
Yes.
Which Americans tend not to do
True.
very much.
Yeah.
But you remember he taught, if I remember right, wasn't he a school teacher, or he
was taught.
He was taught by
he was owned by a school teacher, I think.
Yes,
and then
that's what it was.
Who took him
his
with
baritone,
him
oh my
to the
gosh,
classes,
that voice.
I know.
That voice.
I bet he's a really nice singer.
I know they can't do it because it'd be too stereotypical, but God, I would love to see him sing.
That's exactly what I just said.
As long as he doesn't sing Old Man River.
Oh, just nobody knows the trouble I've seen.
My last one is Maria Doyle Kennedy as Jocasta. I think she does a great job as Jocasta, of playing warm, manipulative, stuck in power, all those things. That's a complex character. My favorite costume is the house coat that Bree has on when she catches Lord John doing the nasty in the
whatever the room,
wherever they are,
in the pantry,
in the hallway,
in the closet hallway. The best line, my favorite line delivery, I just added this one, is when Jamie says, "I know for certain that he was somebody's child." I thought that was like, boosh, and that's what finally got Claire's attention. Okay, Antoinette.
Standout performances. Lauren as Marcelly. I thought Sophie did some really good work in this episode. The conflict, the anguish that she portrayed, I really started to feel for her, and that's good because that's a long way for me, because I've not been enamored of the Bree character throughout the whole of season 4. So I think she did some really good work in certain scenes in this episode. So I was really very impressed by her. And I liked Ulysses' performance because I tend to like understated performances. So, you know, and the fact that he uses not just his face, but his entire body, you know, to convey, you know, whatever it is he's thinking and going through. I really appreciate that level of commitment to the character in a small role where, you know, he's using everything to bring the character to life. I loved Sam's performance in the tent. You know, the doubt, the self-doubt, the blaming himself, you know, all the vulnerability. He really conveyed that to me, and that I don't think I've been moved to tears since which episode was our favorite?
409.
6, 409, was it?
409. What's the
Yeah.
name of it?
Birds and bees.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't think I've been moved to tears since then, but yeah, the vulnerability there on display was really, it caught me. I love the dining room set. You know, it was opulent, it was rich, it was, but again, it didn't become a character. It wasn't distracting to me. You know, it enhanced, but didn't take my eyes away from the action. You know, so that I always appreciate the fact that the sets are well done, but they don't become a character in themselves. Costume wise, I love everything that Jocasta is wearing in this episode. I love those costumes on her. For some reason, I didn't really like Bree's costumes, but I like Jocasta's dresses, and I like the suit that Lord John, the blue suit, the one that the grand entrance. Oh, here I am.
Okay, and let's jump right into what worked for you and what didn't work for you, Catherine.
What worked for me was it was a little choppy for me, but however, I did like that I liked every single scene. There was nothing I would have taken out. There's nothing I would have added. So I did like that. I did like the conversations between characters. They did seem realistic, especially with Marcelly. Sometimes I find that the writing forgets human nature, and I didn't feel that with this. I felt like every single conversation, except the one where Ian was talking to Claire at the river, saying, you know, telling her, Auntie, go talk to Jamie. I just thought that was very, it fit the character, but the dialogue just didn't seem to work for me. What didn't work also was Fergus. They really just, he is such a handsome young man who, if given the opportunity, would probably act very well, but they just don't give him anything to sink his teeth into. And so he's just bland. And he wasn't bland in person. His whole thing was that he was very flamboyant. And in the books, and he's, you know, he walks into a room and everybody notices because he was just so incredibly handsome. And the thing is that the actor, is it Cesar or Cesar, depending on, I guess, which country, he's very handsome. And if given the opportunity, he would really shine, but it's just they don't give it to him. Why, if she was so far along, was she to marry and they know that she was pregnant already? Because how in the world were they going to play off the fact that she was already almost 3 months pregnant?
No,
She was almost 4.
No, she's 5 according to the script.
Well,
She's
wait, how that timing doesn't work out because it takes 2 months for them to get to the Mohawk village. Roger just showed up.
Courtney, she was,
I know,
months along when they left. So
that's 4 months because Roger just showed up to the village and got smacked around at the very end.
But my thing is this: how in the world were they going to play that off? I mean,
well, they probably are just going to be like, surprise.
Yeah.
Oh, they did that all the time back then.
But my thing is also, why Lieutenant Wolf? I mean, it seemed like everyone was from a certain caliber except for him.
And Antoinette, you must have loved him. He was so understated.
Who referred to him as a cartoon character? You know who he reminded me of? He reminded me of the dad in those oh Jesus, you know that superhero family that are all cartoons.
Oh,
The
The Incredibles.
Incredibles?
The Incredibles. He reminds me of the dad in The Incredibles. That's
With a bad wig. Oh my god.
Oh, gosh.
His face
I
is so good.
Lieutenant Wolf is a backup in case something happened to Forbes. I think her eye Forbes.
okay.
I'm the
So
judge.
I'm the judge.
Well,
Okay,
and
so-
knowing Jocasta, she was trying to get Lieutenant Wolf off her case because
Yeah,
he's
that's
trying
true.
to marry her all the time, you know?
That's also, yes.
Carmen?
That I thought finding Caleb's remains in the woods was an effective way of moving the story forward, to tell them that they were on the right path. It took them a while to figure it out, but they did. Caleb is the fellow who was Roger's fellow prisoner and dies along the way. And I thought that was a pretty inventive way of them getting a clue that they were headed in the right direction, because it's a little bit different in the book. I think Jamie, he's not sold, he's given to the Iroquois, and then the Iroquois pass him off onto the Mohawks. So they're able to trace it by going to the Iroquois first and then on. So this was
Although
a little
technically they're one and the same.
Well, it's one of the nations of the
One of the
Iroquois.
nations within the Iroquois. I know, but I
Yeah.
think that was something that I think was changed or was brought up
Well,
later.
I think it was done to make the story less complicated, to sort of simplify the story a little bit. You don't think so?
Yes, in the writing, yes. In
Yes,
the book,
it was simplified
confusing.
in the writing. Yeah,
Yeah. In the
that's
book,
what
it
I
was
meant.
confusing. Yeah.
So finding Caleb's remains, and there's more I want to say about the remains, by the way. I hope we come back to
we
that
got a
in
lot
a
to
We
say
minute.
about that.
will let you talk all about those bones.
Yay. I really want to come back to Bree's face when she discovers that Lord John is, although he's basically gay, he can perform sexually as a husband. And the look on her face when she finds that out, I thought was really pretty riveting. She's not the greatest actress I've had the privilege to view, but I think she's improving with time. And I thought that she portrayed her confusion and dawning awareness that this was a little bit more complicated man than she first assumed.
Not to mention,
So
he looks like the
he
man I'm in love with. But
Pardon?
anyway, I said,
I'm
not to
sorry?
mention, she looks like the man he's in love with.
Yeah, right.
Yes, that's too, which is why he says you're playing with fire, because he sees Jamie in her, and that has to be very potent for him.
Mhm.
Yeah, when she's offering herself, she actually shrinks back.
Yes, she does.
When he says that, I thought that was very effective. Very good nuance.
It was good nuance, and I thought that whole conversation was really quite well done. I want to make a comment about an actor that we haven't said anything about, and I'm going to try to pronounce his name. So forgive me. It's spelled Kaheroton, but the R is pronounced as an L, according to the script. So Kahalaton, very handsome man, but I think his relationship with Roger is really interesting. I think he's an absolutely gorgeous man, number one. I can hardly take my eyes off of him when he's on the screen. But number two, his relationship with Roger is just really very interesting. I don't know how to peg it. I don't know whether he has moments of compassion. I don't know whether I don't understand how he views Roger
as a possession, as a
possession. And I think when he pushes him into the gamut, they want to see whether or not he can get through that and come out the other side alive.
I bet he
But
lives.
I do. I think he sees him as possession, but I wonder if there's not something a little bit more there.
What did you say, Catherine?
I said, I bet he lives. Huh? My first thought was, man, they're gangster. They're jumping him into the tribe. That's what I thought.
They're jumping him into the what?
You know how in gangs they like jump people in by
By
beating them
beating
up.
them.
Yeah.
And I was like, yeah, they're gangster. That's all.
When Claire climbs on
Really?
top of
Yeah.
Jamie, she sits too far up on his body. She needs to be further back down if she's really going to simulate the
Oh, when
act.
she was halfway up his down his thigh, I was like,
Yeah,
whoa.
or she's too
I was like,
far
wishful
down or she's
thinking.
too far up. Really, huh?
My
Yes.
interpretation of that is that that was just their foreplay. She was just trying to get things started. Nothing was started. So that was just foreplay for them.
Really? Okay, so do you guys dry hump as a married couple for like a long time?
No.
What do you
No.
mean dry hump? I'm not familiar with that term. You mean you just climb on?
No.
Is that what that means?
That's like,
oh
God, my
the
kids
anatomist
are in the
here.
house. That is when you, like, what Antoinette is suggesting that they're doing, because she's just got all her clothes on and she's like,
Yeah.
Oh, I hope
Oh, they're
That-
not really having intercourse. You mean
there's no intercourse.
she's just
like
rubbing
that.
she's just rubbing herself around on him, right?
Yeah,
yeah,
exactly.
so that's
okay.
what Antoinette's saying.
Yeah, they weren't simulating the act because he wasn't doing anything. She was just trying to get him excited.
I thought she was halfway down his thigh, so I was just like, oh, please, really?
And Karmen thought she was up too high.
I thought she was up too high. She was about where his pelvic bones were to me, because his
oh boy, this is gonna get me good.
because you can see his thighs. His
That's
thighs
true.
are exposed.
That's true.
His sark is up, and you can see his thighs. So she's above where the crease of his where his hip, his inguinal region, where his hip reaches.
Well, maybe
I don't know
he
how
was
to
like,
say this.
but he's still,
maybe he
still young,
curves.
so he's like, you know.
For me, that was just foreplay. I saw all the criticisms of the sex scene but it wasn't even a sex scene. It was just a couple seconds. It wasn't even a sex scene. They
do theirs. They do theirs in a couple of seconds. Like, it's like there's a joining, and then Claire's like,
but we didn't even see that. That's what I'm saying. That's what I didn't.
Well,
it was a prelude to a sex.
They've changed the scenes. Have you noticed that?
Maybe that's older PG. Claire. Maybe Claire needs a little.
Yeah, but they've gotten much more PG since the first season.
But her movements of her hips, to me,
simulate
looked like they were simulating. She was simulating having intercourse. But
Catherine's ruined it for me, because instead of watching the scene, I'm like, is there a rhythm? What's he doing?
He's not doing anything. He's just lying there like a good boy when, she tells him to.
I had a lot of problem with Claire's comments that she made in the tent to Jamie. One of the things that I felt her apology, where she says, "I'm sorry, I was upset, but not with you." I thought she was dissembling, because in the former episode, she gave him a lot of really filthy looks. And now she's saying she's upset with the world, Stephen Bonnet, everybody, but not with you. I did not think that was very honest of her. I thought she was upset with him, if we can trust what went on in the prior episode. And that's one of the problems, by the way, and I'll digress here for a moment, with having multiple writers. I don't think the continuity flows as well. There's one writer of the books, and she knows her books well, and she knows her characters well. And that's why we don't see much of this sort of thing in Diana's writing. It's a flow. The characters are true. She's true to the character that she's writing about.
I was hoping in the Jamie Claire tent scene that she was going to say that she's angry with herself.
Yeah, she did, I thought.
Nope. Everyone else but herself.
Yeah, she doesn't say that.
Yeah,
I know.
She says she's sorry that she didn't tell him about Bonnet when she knew. But
that actually even came up later, kind of as and maybe things would have been different if I told you, like an aside.
Yeah.
Instead of, I was complicit.
I was responsible for this whole clusterfuck, basically, because
Yeah.
Yeah.
because
Afu.
you know,
Yeah, and then I had the gall to be mad at you about it.
Yeah.
don't get me started on the previous episode because no,
Yeah, we'll
Oh,
do
no.
it. We will do it.
oh, no.
We'll do that.
Yeah, we have to do that because I have so much to say
I know.
about that whole debacle.
I was so annoyed by that episode that I was like, I don't even want to talk about it.
Mm-mm-mm.
So I'm glad that we just
Yes.
will give it a little space and go
Yes.
back.
And let us all calm down.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so I want to know how Lord John and Bree got to the other side of the river.
Well, I thought that too. I was like, well, there's no bridge. It's awfully far.
It must have been Eutroculus.
Yeah, he must have been there with his barge somewhere. That was one. Why didn't Murtaugh and Fergus wait till nighttime to try to remove Bonnet instead of the middle of the day? That didn't make, it's daylight and they're just down the block from patrols. I mean, I that bothered me.
Well, because he couldn't get caught that way. Maybe they were trying to get him out of there before anyone noticed he was missing.
Well, that's a possibility too. The last one that I want to point out is, did you see the turkey
Yes.
that Jamie shot is? Its head is like this. If you've ever been bird hunting, I know you guys don't believe it.
We believe you. I'm fascinated.
We believe you. Definitely believe you.
The bird head just goes limp.
Yeah.
Completely. You don't care what kind of bird it is. It falls. It falls down. And here's this bird.
So was it stuffed? What do you think, Karmen?
Oh yeah, it was a prop, but they could have. It would have been more realistic if the head had flopped down, which would be easy to do with a stuffed.
Mm-hmm.
You just don't put any stuffing right at that juncture.
Yeah, exactly.
The main one I'll mention is that in the book, the scene between Marcelly and Fergus where she asks Murtaugh to take him was actually in the book in Dragonfly and Amber, chapter 35, I believe. And it's between Jamie and Ian and Jenny. And Jenny asks Jamie to take Ian on to go to battle, because it's basically they swapped out the whole thing. And I thought it worked really beautifully. I thought it was very effective and it totally worked.
They still kept that with Ian and Jamie, didn't they, when he went off with the watch?
The watch.
Yeah.
But that was a different scene.
Yeah, I kind of thought I remembered that too from the show, but no, it's only the book I'm remembering.
Yeah.
I read it in the book only.
Okay.
It was in the book.
Well, I thought that worked very well. What I think didn't work, and Catherine, you already talked about this, is I don't know what happened to Fergus in this episode, because, he was a smuggler in Edinburgh and he was, doing seditious printing and doing all this stuff with Jamie. And then all of a sudden in this episode, when Murtaugh punches Stephen Bonnet, Fergus is like, wow. I was thinking, what happened to this character? I just felt like that part didn't quite work. There wasn't a continuity there between this worldly kid who grew up in a brothel and then was Jamie's pickpocket and all this stuff. And then all of a sudden he's this innocent, wide-eyed boy. I liked the way they portrayed slavery in this episode. In almost every scene, they're in the back. They're there. They're in the background. It's like it's a constant reminder this is going on. I thought it was really cool that Lord John pulled out that this land is not new. This land's been here as long as any land.
It's hope that.
Mm-hmm.
There's some irony there too, right?
Mm-hmm.
Thinking about the Native Americans and the slaves,
and that's when you talk about hierarchy and caste and there is a, and this is something the British actually have done everywhere that they've been. They create strata. Well, they have it in their own country. And so, but they do it wherever they've gone. And what it does, it keeps them in control because they've always created a buffer between themselves and whoever might rise up against them. I think in the Americas, it was a little more difficult simply because there was too much blurring between slaves, former slaves, and Indians. And so, but one thing they did do is they elevated Indians above slaves, even though Indians initially were slaves. The reason they brought in Africans was because the Indians died when they tried to enslave them.
It's so interesting, this color, continuum of this decision of the lighter skinned slaves will be in the house, and the darker you are, the more crappy your
this is the thing,
life and your job.
Slaves often were the ones who were newly arrived also. So they weren't as acclimated, but then the ones who were in the house were, I mean, when you think about, that's how the strata is formed. It's like the closer you are to being English, the better you are. And so the lighter
and English are very white.
Had to have had some, English in you. And so that's how that, and it's not just there, it's everywhere. I mean, it's the same in all their colonies as well.
Yeah.
In all the colonies, in England, I mean, in India, in Africa, it's just always been that, the closer you are to looking or, seeming English, the better off you were. And they created this middle, South Africa is really obvious. You have, Africans, coloreds, Indians, and then white. So problem is that it's still manifest now. Yeah, there's still a lot of hostility. Colorism is quite evident.
In British colonies?
No, right now in the United States.
Oh, yeah.
Amongst former slaves, there's a lot of colorism. Well, you see it also. I mean, you also see it everywhere. It's like blonde-haired, blue-eyed versus, brunette, brown-eyed. But but it's a little different, and it's a little more. There's some hostility still
amongst the African American community.
Well, up until the 1970s, they had what they called the brown paper bag rule. You couldn't get a job in a department store unless your skin was lighter, the same color or lighter than a brown paper bag.
Is that right? I've never heard that.
I have never heard that either.
Yeah, it was a brown paper bag rule.
Wow.
Test. So if you were darker than a brown paper bag, you couldn't be in a position where you came in contact with public. And that was in Detroit. So I can imagine what it was like in other places. I mean, that was in northern cities. That wasn't, a lot of people give the impression that southern cities were more racist or because they were segregated because of Jim Crow laws. But a lot of the attitudes were still in the North. They just weren't as obvious. My grandfather...
They weren't as open about it.
My mother's father was considered pretty well off, and he was a chauffeur. And the only reason he could be a chauffeur was because he was very fair. And then when they started, when the car companies in Detroit started hiring, they would hire light-skinned Black people. Department store, Sears and Roebuck, that was just what it was. And so, of course, it created a lot of hostility,
right,
between those who had and those who had, and that was intentional. I mean, if you have 300 slaves, what better way than to make sure they don't combine in uprisings than to take half of them and treat them better than the other half, and
divide and conquer.
Exactly, that's exactly what happened, and it's still happening actually.
It is only fairly recently that you really see African American or stars of color that are really quite dark. Before they were not, and now they're being more true, I feel, to the range of humans, that we have on this earth, and I, for one, am for that. But I do think that it is a fairly recent. A recent event.
if you ever get a chance, if you ever want to see something that kind of puts this all out there in perspective, is Chris Rock did a documentary and it's called Good Hair, and it's very much about it's about hair and how, because hair ended up representing a lot of, even apart from skin color, then hair became an issue. And so now, just like you say, you're starting to see darker skinned people, you're also starting to see people with natural hair. It used to be where you never saw a black woman with hair that wasn't straightened.
Yeah.
Now that's not the case anymore. But
Right.
even as recently as a week ago, someone said to me, if I had hair like yours, I'd wear it natural too. And that was just a week ago, So people still have this attitude about hair and curl pattern, and it's quite phenomenal.
When you realize how recent what things were like in the 60s and how recent the 60s are.
Yeah.
It's
I
staggering.
mean, when I was born, people couldn't vote where I live right now.
Wow.
If I were an adult where I am now, when I was born, I wouldn't have been able to vote.
It's unbelievable.
But there was also a lot of resilience, obviously. And so you did have, but interestingly, because there was a lot of segregation and because people didn't want to deal with, there were large segments of the population that had to cater to themselves. So you did have a lot of prosperity within each group because no one wanted mixing. So you had a very large Black middle class. You had a very large, even Indian middle class. You had a very large Italian, Irish, and everyone, because everyone kind of divided up. And then when segregation was removed, suddenly that went away in a lot of places.
I was bused.
Mm-hmm.
I grew up in Texas, and I was bused to the Black neighborhood in second grade.
Yep, busing.
Yeah.
My husband, who, schools in South Carolina did desegregate till 1971. But even when I was growing up, even in Michigan, they were busing. But it was the other way around. They took Black students and bused them into white neighborhoods.
Yeah, that's what the Black students came to our neighborhood for, I don't know what they did for kindergarten, but first, third, fourth, and fifth. And we went to their neighborhood for second.
Okay.
And we rode a school bus. And because I was raised by two non-Texans, for me, it was just riding the bus was so I couldn't wait because my brothers got to ride the bus in second grade. And I would go down there and wait for the bus driver. And she was so nice. And it was a red pony bus. And I loved my second grade teacher. And there was not any racist talk in my house. So, I mean, I was around it as a Texan. I heard it.
It is, unfortunately, though, what's happening is that it's reversing a lot. I've been in South Carolina now since 2007. And it's just really changed. I mean, it was very comfortable living here in 2007. It's becoming less and less comfortable living here now. It's just really changed a lot. The attitudes in the country have reversed quite a bit.
Yes.
It's almost,
people are giving permission to behave badly again. And, I think that's evident everywhere.
But, it swings back and forth. But like my father-in-law said, we've been through worse, we lived through worse, and we fought against worse and won against worse.
Lord John Gray I was surprised. I mean, as a viewer, I was like, wow, that was, kind of fun, I guess. But yeah, I'm not really buying that he would
be more careful.
Yeah, that he would be somewhere where Bree could come upon him. Now, as I was thinking through it, in the book, I believe he's in the slave quarters. He comes out of the slave quarters. So maybe the reasoning was the slaves do know, because this is their, preparation room or whatever closet. And he knows nobody else is going to be around but them, and they can't say anything or they won't. And because in the book, he did come out of the slave quarters. But I just found that I couldn't quite get past that they're having this conversation, Bree and Lord John Grey, and that she wouldn't be picturing him.
Yeah, I know that bite.
That she saw him hours before. You know what I mean? I just was like, eh.
Especially someone from the 60s.
Yeah.
It's not like this was,
she was a virgin.
2019.
It's not like she would. I don't think she'd be like, oh yeah, all right. That's his choice. That whole thing was just a little like, a little bit the psychology game.
I never heard of it.
Yeah.
Well, and
it wasn't well acted
these are the
either.
people who are going to put people on trial for witchcraft. And if you say, oh, let me play a psychology game, and all of a sudden somebody has a squirrel and these secrets, I would think they'd be like, she's a witch, based on prior things.
The only part of that scene that worked was when he said, must I close my eyes? And she just went, yes.
Okay, Antoinette, was there anything that worked for you, and was there anything that didn't work for you?
Okay, let's start with what didn't work.
Surprise, surprise, surprise.
Quelle surprise. Okay. We have 13 episodes per season. These books are ginormous. So screen time is precious to tell this story. And what does not work for me is when precious screen time is devoted to things that don't really advance the story, tell us anything about the characters, plant seeds for other things that are to happen. So what didn't work for me is that they spent too damn long at River Run. They're coming down the stairs, the dinner party, the game, the conversations. It was just too much. What I came away with was imbalance. There was just too much time devoted to other things, and then things that were important for the rest of the story were just felt to me like they were just crammed into the last 15 minutes. They have to find a way to pace the thing and be aware of how they're using the screen time. So I thought, even though I enjoyed the scenes at River Run, as I said, it was good TV. In the overall arc of the story, I felt impatient because I wanted them to get on with it. I would have loved to have seen a little bit more of the search for Roger and less of the shenanigans at River Run. We had enough of the Marcelly Fergus dynamic, but the Jamie, Claire, Ian that storyline felt just rushed. Not enough time was given to it. So that didn't work for me. What worked for me was that the scenes as they were, for the most part, were very well done. The acting was good for the most part. Everything. Nice show. But I want the Outlander story. And I felt shortchanged.
I'm surprised you say that. Because that's the part I've been going back to. I've not watched the whole episode. I only go back to the point where they're at River Run, and then I go on. So I only watch that part. But
you only watch the River Run part.
I only watch the River Run part. Lord John Grey. What was up with that initial scene? I still don't understand that.
I think that was to show only people think. He went back. He's in a hot shower.
But then what did it mean though? Then he was in a hot shower and then he's
somehow it was a waking dream or something.
Crazy.
I don't know.
Can I hug back this? Can I reclaim my time for a minute there?
Sorry.
Absolutely.
Reclaiming my time. Hold on a second. That whole 5 minutes in the shower. What the hell? And also, so that didn't work for me. I'm sorry. That did not work. I understand why they did it, because the last time we saw him, he looked like he was going through the stones. So I understand why they did it. But, they do underestimate the intelligence of the people who watch this show. They don't have to give us little breadcrumbs like we're Hansel and Gretel in the forest. We can make trying to find our way home. We can make links. We can use our gray matter and figure things out. Another thing that didn't work for me, I did not like the scene with John Gray, the sex scene with John Gray, Lord John Gray. I didn't think it was necessary. Everybody knows that he's gay, and I didn't see why it was necessary to see him in the act.
Mm-hmm.
I don't see how it gave us any new information about him, and so I'm wondering, did we need to see his technique? What?
Why did they just show them
want
kissing?
any sex in the show?
Why did they just show them kissing though?
You know what I'm saying? Yeah. Show some intimacy. You know what I mean?
Maybe that's the dominant edge we were looking for.
Oh, because we thought that he had lost his edge. Show some intimacy then. Show some intimacy. But not this.
Well, but that wasn't going to be intimate. I mean, come on. That was.
No, but they could show them kissing.
He wasn't going to fall in love with the guy,
But Bree did not know that Lord John Gray was gay. We all know.
Yeah, that was the point of the scene.
That was the point.
That was the point.
Now, that was the point of that scene for Bree to find out.
It could have been done more tastefully, perhaps.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I think they could have gone outside by a tree or something.
Exactly. Being in the house.
Yeah.
The way it was done didn't work for me.
No.
And I understand now what you're saying about, yes, it was done so that Bree could find out. Fine. Because in the book, she does find out. But I just didn't like the way that they portrayed it on the show.
I know you have court in the morning. Do you want to go to the legal part?
In terms of the legal part, when she threatens him with telling, I don't think she understood the implications of that in that time. Because the sentence for buggery, which is what he probably would have been charged with, was death, hanging. Wow. It was only in 1853, I think, that it was changed from hanging to life imprisonment. And then later on in the 60s, that was reduced to about 2 years in prison still.
In the 60s?
In 1963, I think.
I think it depends a little bit on the state, but
I'm thinking in England. I'm not thinking in America. I'm thinking in England,
right?
Because that's where Lord John, came from. So I was thinking of the laws that were pertaining in England, and remember, America was still a colony, so it was the English law that they would all be subject to. Mm-hmm. Do you know what I mean? So the penalty for buggery is death. So when he says ruin his life, yeah, your life will be ruined. You'll be dead.
You sure wouldn't be in the hallway then. You know what I mean? In the pantry.
You'd be like, understand the threat she was making. That's why she made it.
She didn't understand.
I got it, but he would have understood and wouldn't have been that reckless.
It came from the 60s. It could still ruin someone's life. Maybe she didn't realize it would cause him death, but she knew it was going to ruin his life.
We're only don't ask, don't tell,
Really? That was what? A few years ago.
That was just a few years ago. So, so I don't think that didn't work. That didn't work. It wasn't realistic. But I don't think that the Bree character, with her 1960s sensibilities, understood that. But the Lord John character should have, and it should have produced a much more bigger reaction from him than just to say, it would ruin my life and my reputation.
Well, he wouldn't have done it in the first place. He wouldn't.
Exactly. He wouldn't have been so reckless, as you say.
No.
To put on my best Simon Cowell accent, that would be a no from me.
For me, the big theme I'm going to say is blended family and intentions in this, because we see Jocasta is actually trying to help Brianna when she gives her that speech. And quite honestly, I like the relationship between Jocasta and Bree and Lord John Gray and Bree, because Bree is so bratty, and I feel like everyone else lets her act like a, brat, and those two are like wham, and so I enjoy that. But the intentions are good. Jamie's intention in beating up Roger was a loving one. Claire's intention in keeping a secret from Bree was a loving one. It's this wacky blended family, and even Ulysses and Jocasta, and Bree's intention in painting Phaedra. It's all a little off between the giver and the receiver, as it is in human relationships, but the intentions are there, and this big blended family. Catherine?
I felt it was everyone was rallying around Bree, and that's what I felt. Her parents in trying to find Roger, her parents and Ian, Jocasta trying to find her husband, Phaedra trying to make her look good, Lizzie, oh my gosh. Miss Spoiler alert there. She's like a walking spoiler alert. But anyway, her trying to take care of Bree, which is actually interesting that they have her there, because what it does is it removes any necessity for a slave to take care of her. The other is, Lord John, rallying around Bree. It just was, everyone was rallying around this person who thankfully they made likable. So it became less annoying to see it happen.
Karmen?
I think one of them was Bree coming to terms with living in the 18th century and all of the restraints and differences from the way she was raised. She was raised by a doting father who, she could do no wrong in Frank's eyes, apparently. And I think, and privileged, because she would have had a good deal of wealth. She would have been raised, by a physician and a professor, so she wouldn't have wanted for much, I don't think, in the way of material possessions. So I think her coming to grips, and I agree with what's been said, I think Lord John and Jocasta both really went a long way in trying to help her see the situation in which she found herself, and that she needed to think very seriously about the choices that she needed to make.
I thought they were attempting to talk about vulnerability and emotional wounds, that are there, that can't be seen and need time to heal. I thought that's what they were attempting, but I don't think the episode was successful in that for me. But that is a theme that runs throughout, the books and everything, in terms of people being stripped down to, to their bare selves, to their essential selves, by everything that life throws at them, and how through their relationships with the people in their lives, they are built back up and find themselves again. So I saw the inklings of that theme with the progression of Bree in this episode, to her being so angry and so obnoxious, to realizing where she is and accepting that she needs not to bring her son into the world to be labeled a fatherless bastard. She was stripped down, and through interacting with Jocasta and Lord John, she's regaining, some of herself. So that almost worked. I got into Outlander for the Jamie and Claire relationship, and how that central relationship ripples out, with their extended family, with the children that they raise, who are not necessarily blood children, with the home that they try to create. Do you see what I mean? So for me, when an episode is really great, is when that relationship is central, and then we see all the other ripples. I kept waiting for that to happen, and then we got it in the last 10 minutes. So, the themes were there. I picked them up as threads, but I don't think that they were fully delivered.
We're going to talk about some bones now.
Some bones, them bones.
And bones and bones. Yeah, so go have at it, ladies.
like to start off by saying that the left leg and foot looked like it was petrified, not mummified. It was supposed to be mummified, but I think to be mummified, they needed a little more detail. It looked like it was.
Wait, isn't mummified in wrappings?
No, that's not what. That's one way you can mummify, but no, mummified means that there's not total disintegration. It's more like it dried out, but the tissue is still, the skin and some of the tissue is still intact. So, I recognized immediately that what it was. It's very easy to see that it was human because the human foot is quite unique amongst the animal world. But I thought that could have been done a little bit more accurately. The other thing was that Ian says, and he's missing 2 fingers. He's been lying on the forest floor for a month. And, you think that predators are not going to come and eat his body parts. Yeah, even Rollo did. So, that's not very good proof. Now, the way the coat worked, because I think it was fairly distinctive. I went back to the prior episode to see if they actually showed Caleb's hand.
Yes, they did.
They did. And you know what? It's very clever because they had him grasping the rope like this, so that he was covering his left 2 third and fourth fingers with his right hand. So we couldn't see whether or not he was missing.
Well, they showed it. They showed it when they were sitting at the tree, when the Mohawk were telling the story around the fire, and they were sitting at the tree.
The dark?
They showed his hand without the fingers.
Oh, it did.
Because I noticed it then, and so when they mentioned it the second time, I wasn't surprised.
So, so anyway, I thought that was that whole thing was pretty cool and interesting, and I liked it.
Was that a femur? Was it a femur bone?
I thought, didn't that femur seem awfully large for such a short man?
It looked like a piece of wood to me.
And it's like the acetabulum, it just looked too big.
No, I think it was the epiphysis.
Well, you would know better.
Do you see people with skin on their bones?
Well, yeah, I don't see bones that often, other than in X-rays.
The femur doesn't have that diameter. It was circumference. It was too big around. But the other thing that they were trying to show was that the epiphysis had been chewed off, and what was left was the end of the shaft at the knee part. And then Rollo comes up with his chewy toy. And it's the lower leg and the foot. Kind of looks like they didn't really bury Caleb. Kind of looks like maybe they just put some leaves over the top of him.
And left him.
Wait, what made you think that?
Well,
he was kind of out in the open.
Because he was out in the open. Yeah.
No, when they came back, wasn't there?
How would he have been that intact, actually, if they hadn't buried him?
What?
And he had been there for a month.
Well, that's what Karmen was saying. They couldn't be like, well, he's missing 2 fingers, or he's missing a lot by then.
Did you notice that Bree is drinking at 4 or 5 months?
Yes, I did notice that.
Yeah.
I assumed it was a port, so it's probably low alcohol, sweet,
And that's what they didn't drink water.
But then the 60s, women were still smoking when they were pregnant.
Yeah. But I'm going to say that I looked it up.
Didn't Claire smoke when she was pregnant with Bree?
What?
Claire?
I don't think
in the show
Claire ever smoked.
No, it was
no.
After
no, in the show they showed that she smoked.
But
what?
It was after she
was it after? But but people at that time, doctors were smoking, and they were actually recommending smoking.
Everybody,
oh yeah, my mom smoked with me like some enormous amount, like over a pack a day.
Wow.
Well, I wanted to say that people should not freak out about that, because fetal alcohol syndrome and the other syndromes that they've associated with alcohol intake, steady alcohol intake in pregnant women, didn't come about until 1973. So Bree had already passed through the stones by then. She didn't have the information. So,
and Claire certainly drank when she was pregnant with Bree. Yes. She was slamming down whiskey and all kinds of stuff.
Yeah, that's right. So I wanted to mention that. And then Roger's black and blue left eye. It still is black and blue 2 months in, presumably. That black and blueness usually goes away by the second and third week. So that was...
You think it was from when he rolled down the hill, perhaps? Or maybe they beat him up again when they got him back from the stone?
Well, it could be that they added to it. Wouldn't be surprised. But anyway, he still has... If it's the original they intend, it should really should have resolved by then.
And the cuts and everything.
The cuts, it could take longer for them to resolve. But the black and blueness really goes away in 2 to 3 weeks. So that wasn't quite right. Jocasta's blindness.
Well, one of the things that bothered me about that was that in the book, one of that you couldn't tell, that they didn't realize she was blind because she was so astute and who was in the room and where people were talking, that she looked as if she was looking right at people. And so they weren't even aware she was blind right off the bat. I think she kind of overdoes it a little bit. She acts like someone who's blind, who could never see at all before, rather than someone who was sighted and then became blind. She kind of looks off instead of trying to look at the person.
And doesn't she have macular degeneration? Isn't that?
Yes. Yeah. But she was sighted all her. No, it was what was it?
Glaucoma.
Glaucoma. Yeah.
Okay. Oh.
Because she gets stuck in her eye.
And so she could still see shapes and shadows.
Right. Yeah.
She just couldn't see detail. Bree was overacting the pregnancy.
I thought she looked very pregnant for a first pregnancy of what I thought was 4 months.
But even still, she didn't look that big for her to be, always, holding her back and going through all this stuff. I mean, that's 8 or 9 months. That's not it 4 or 5 months.
That's right.
I think she looks like Claire, and I think she looks like Jamie. So it's just the height. I mean, that by formula, she would not be that short. Having parents as tall as they are. And I can't remember it off the top of my head, and I meant to look it up, but it's like 2/3 of one parent and a height of one parent plus 1/3 of the other parent. And then you combine them, so she would have probably been somewhere between Claire and Jamie.
She was 6 feet in the...
Yeah, in the books. But so she just comes off as like way too short.
Yeah.
I did a little research on a question that came up in another call, which was whether there's the same editor in every episode. And there were 2 editors in season 1. Mike, I think they call him Mikey O'Halloran, is the main one. He was the first one. And then this Liza Cardinalis, I think is her name, came on. And interestingly, I didn't look at every single episode, but I looked throughout the seasons, and I didn't really see a connect with. I saw their names associated with great episodes and ones we didn't really like that much. I'm not sure it comes down to the editing, but it was interesting for me to know. And there are new editors in season 3 and season 4. It was interesting for me to note that I think the first case of when we felt like Jamie wasn't Jamie was in Boobgate in season 1. Episode 109, The Reckoning, where he is a little tempted by Leary. And that's the first time I can remember.
Yeah.
What?
She puts his hand on her breast, and he doesn't pull away.
Well, and he's like,
yeah.
I think that was the first time there was
a partner for years, though.
Pardon?
At least for the time he was in. She was his makeout partner, so.
Well, just Jamie from the books was so Catholic that there's no way. It was cut and dried for him, and
I remember
book readers knew that.
I remember,
but that was the first time that I think we felt that little divergence from, and that had to do in part with the editing, because the script in its entirety, he says more about Claire that is more Jamie-like.
Yeah.
But the way it's acted is definitely that he's like, oh, I haven't had sex with my wife and you're really hot.
Yeah, that's kind of,
Yeah, if you remember the podcast for that one, Ira and Ron I think did it, and they said he passed the test. And I'm like, give me a break. What test?
Yeah.
I don't think the guy has been tested enough.
that was very much a guy's thing.
That's
that was
total guy's comment as far as I was concerned.
Yeah.
Well, and a guy's portrayal of, because I remember Ron saying, "Oh, come on, he would be tempted," because the Catholic thing really didn't play in to season 1 at all.
No.
Murtaugh was sleeping with his head on the wall. I thought that looked horrible.
Yeah.
Sleeping that way? You mean?
Yeah. His head was like up on the baseboard.
Well, in Scotland, though, in that time, people slept sitting up.
Oh, really?
Poor people did. Yeah, they did. They had box beds. I've seen them, and they slept sitting up.
So that was historically accurate and representing that he is from a lower caste.
Probably something like that, or maybe he just, the way Murtaugh likes to sleep. It could be something like that. It's true.
Maybe he passed out.
Those box beds were incredibly awful looking devices to sleep in. So
do we want to say anything else about caste? I guess, so the Kelly W is the person who suggested this, and I wanted to be appreciative and sensitive to that request. And I do think it's interesting that this show seems to consider that, as we see Murtaugh at their house sleeping on the floor. Jamie and Claire would never sleep on the floor at their house.
No.
But he is Murtaugh, so he's not at their level of social standing. I'm trying to think who else.
Well, you have different groups. Again, you've got the English, so you have Lord John Grey at top. You have him
he's the top
because she's Scottish version of close to where he is an English version, and then you have the new world people who are in Scotland would probably not have the same level, but the guy with the jewels.
I don't know if you read her comment, but she said this runs. I was surprised you guys didn't bring it up. And this, which we did. We talked about slavery and we talked about American Indians, but we didn't talk about the levels, the other levels. Which you see when Lord John walks in, everyone knows, like, he's
an English lord.
He's the lord.
Yeah. But that's,
his dress illustrates that. And they all just know, like, he was at it's like a chess game.
He was at the head of the
next to her.
Yeah.
And then Forbes must be next.
Yeah.
And then the Judge Alderdice was on
the other side.
The other side of him, and he's of course above, I would think, Forbes.
Well, I would think he's above. Well, I don't know if that has to do with but I think he's definitely above the lieutenant.
Yeah, lieutenant's the bottom of the heap.
Yeah. But
the slaves are the bottom of the heap.
With Lord John Grey being at the head of the table opposite of Jocasta was a clear indication of his status. But and I think the fact that Jamie was even given that he was at the table with the governor in the first place, he then get offered the 10,000 acres. Wouldn't have happened had he been anybody else. And I think that Claire, being who she is, also adds to his status, simply because even if as Scots are looked down on by the English, she then brings him up.
His English wife, and she's obviously educated. I mean, it goes back to the very first episode where Blackjack Randall says the language of the speech of a lady, the language of a whore. Right. So everyone's going to hear that.
Yeah.
Not the language of a whore, but the speech of a lady.
That's why I don't understand why there's no comment about Bree's accent, because what does she sound like? No one would. She would probably sound closest to an Irish accent than anything else because of the hard R's.
Well, I think when somebody comes and you have no idea what their accent is, you just kind of assume and you think, okay, well, I've never been to this place.
You know,
Maybe, I don't know.
Mm,
They're not paying any attention to that. That's
no.
true. And I don't. You would think that in the '60s that she would definitely have a marked Boston accent, which she doesn't.
Well, honestly, I don't necessarily agree with, simply because I've known many people from Boston whose parents were educated who did not have Boston accents. Like
And
people on
both
Cambridge,
her parents were English.
but even Americans, I know people who are Americans whose parents are from Cambridge. They were born and raised in Cambridge, and they sounded like they're from the Midwest.
Yeah.
And I think there's a certain Boston accent that's also class related.
Uh-huh.
I think it's a class thing.
I went
in
to our
Boston.
medical school in the '60s, and there were a lot of students there and faculty that had the Boston
accent.
Not all, so I
Yeah.
understand what you're saying, but that I don't know that necessarily would explain her lack. But both parents are British or speaking with the typical
British accent.
I think that probably had a lot to do with
Probably.
how she spoke in her home.
But you'd also think that now that she's away from there, that her accent would have softened some, just because of being around everyone else with no one else speaking the way she does, that her accent would start softening.
Yeah.
She says one word with a little British, anything.
The thing part is anything. It's kind of
or she says anything. Yeah. I know a kid. Now he was younger. He was maybe in 5th grade or 6th grade. His parents are British, and they came over here for school. And he would absolutely assume a completely different non-British American accent. And I witnessed this because we were at their house and he was just talking along with this very thick British accent with his family. And then my son came, who was basically his peer, and it switched. He had a completely American accent because that's what he has at school. And at home, he speaks with a British accent. So I don't know. I
mean, we were the same way. I was the same way in Kenya. When I spoke to my Kenyan friends, it was one accent. Was at home, it was a different, and it wasn't so much intentional. It was just that was what you hear, it kind of comes out.
Yeah, well, accents are completely mutable based on the situation.
When I meet people from Michigan, they're very surprised when I tell them I'm from Michigan, but I don't have the kind of nasally kind of talking Michigan, which is
Michigan is very distinctive accent.
Very distinctive, like Pello and Mel, Kathy. I'm not, I'm Kathy. I'm not Kathy, and it's very, so people often think I'm from the Northeast or from the Caribbean, and that's people from Michigan.
The Caribbean. I grew up in Texas, and I had a full-on Texas accent as a kid. Then my dad's from Grand Rapids, and his family built a cottage on Lake Michigan.
Okay.
In the
the accent
40s, but we would go there in the summer, and my cousins wouldn't be able to I remember saying one time, "Do you want some bacon?" And my cousin said, "You want to go biking?"
When we first moved to Texas, we lived there for 12 years. We went through a gas station in West Texas, and this guy said, "Chickerol." And I said, "I'm sorry, what? Chickerol." I said, I don't understand what you're saying. Finally, I said, "Check your oil." Oh.
Because I went to med school in Michigan, but we interviewed all throughout the South. And I was in Tennessee, and the director, the residency director, asked me, he goes, "Well, why are you interested in family medicine?" And I said, "Well, because it's quite expansive." And he goes, "Well, what do you mean by that?" And I said, "It has a lot of breadth and a lot of depth. It's very expansive? And he said, oh, because around here, expansive means it costs a lot of money.
Oh man, I'm gonna make a lot of money because it's expansive.
He goes, because family medicine's not gonna make you that much money. No, yeah.
Let's do a goodbye.
Okay.
Okay. Happy New Year, ladies. Love you all. Bye.
Bye. It's always wonderful. This is always so much fun.
Thank you, everybody. Goodbye, Antoinette. You're so quiet.
Talk to you later.
Bye.
Okay.
See you all later. Bye.
Bye.